Hey gang, Scott here. I've got a new In the Field video coming up right now. Really quickly, if you've been enjoying In the Field videos, I'd like you to check out the In the Field ebook. It's something brand new on my store. I've got 52 different tips for landscape shooters, things to keep you inspired, things to spark your creativity, and it's a tip a week for 2017. And it's a great way to show support for the show. Less than $10, you'll have it in your pocket. Hope you'll check it out. Thanks. This week in the field, those natural obstacles that get in our way sometimes for landscape shoots and figuring out ways to work with them. Hey everyone, I'm Scott Davenport. Welcome to In the Field. Today we're talking about natural distractions or obstacles that we encounter on a shoot. And in this case, for today's video, it's trees and tree branches. So I was at a place called the Arch Rock Overlook along the Oregon coast a few weeks back. And well, first off, it's an interesting spot in the sense that the Arch Rock gets the draw. It's an interesting geological formation. But photographically, I actually found it to be, well, it's cool, but it wasn't necessarily in a great spot to be able to get a good photo. I mean, I took a still of it just with the iPhone. I'll show that to you here. You can actually see there's another photographer who climbed over fences to go and try and get a better angle on this thing. But where the overlook meets the land, it doesn't really lend itself to photographing the Arch Rock other than I would describe it as an I was here type shot. But I had a lot of fun bouncing back and forth between the other two sides of this overlook and looking at the various sea stacks. Let me show you a little bit of footage from one side of this overlook and some of the ideas that came into my mind as I was working through the scene. A little north of Brookings, Oregon, the Arch Rock Overlook, and I'll be honest, Arch Rock is really my least interesting thing here, is what I've found. I've just been enjoying the different views of the sea stacks and have been doing some longer exposures and more minimal compositions. For example, what we're looking at here, there's this one interesting sea stack that's got some evergreens growing on top of it. And I'm making that like the centerpiece of the shot. And I'm taking a big 10-stop filter, throwing it on there. And let's see if I can bring up the last photo and just smoothing everything out. I'm not sure this is coming through on your video screen here. I'll throw a photo up into the YouTube video on this one. But it just smooths all the water out, makes your subject become very, very clear. So I've got about another 30 minutes before the sun's completely gone. Unfortunately, the clouds that were here have kind of run away, and there's one other vantage on the northern side of this point. I'm gonna go check that out as well. I keep running back and forth between the two, trying to figure out which side I'm going to stay with when the sun does go down. I've decided to keep working these two sea stacks. The glow that second stack behind the one with the evergreen is getting from the sun right now is just too much to pass up. I've set the tripod up really high, shooting over the trees and really making this a minimal composition just about these stacks. One thing also I'm having to do is set the timer on the camera so that I can step away from it and get off of this like packed earth onto this concrete, because even just one step during a 30-second exposure, this earth is so densely packed, but it's muddy and I don't know how to describe it, spongy. Every time I step, it transfers vibration to the tripod, and that gives me blurry shots. So, I guess mental note, check your long exposures before you think you've got them and move along, because you may have softness because of vibration. So some natural challenges that were there. I mentioned in the footage about the tripod bounce. So this ground was really well-packed earth, but because it gets a lot of rain, it's still moist. So it was very sponge-like. And I found that if I was just standing still and not doing anything, my shots would be okay. But even for a 10 to 15 second exposure, if I took one step or rocked my weight the wrong way, it would ruin the shot. So that was one challenge to overcome, and that's kind of an easy one. Step farther away from your tripod and use some type of remote trigger or wireless trigger. Now, the other challenge was all these different tree branches that were popping up and reaching into the scene from various areas. It was less pronounced in the footage that I showed you here, but I still did have to work the composition. And so I took it as a challenge to say, oh, how can I use these tree branches to do frame my subject? And so I made sure I positioned myself so the sea stacks I was interested in were between some of these branches that were reaching up into the frame. It's even more pronounced on the northern side of this overlook. I'll show you a still from this where I liked the scene overall, but I was having trouble composing without getting any branches into the scene, and finally decided, well, what if I were to take a step back and compose to just use it, have the trees in the scene and use it to frame what's interesting there, kind of almost like looking through a window out on the land. And I think that worked out pretty well. One other thought that comes to mind about this shoot, I showed you there was a still where another photographer had climbed over the fence lines to try and get a different angle on this. And even in the footage I showed you, you saw my tripod squarely behind the trees. Besides the fact of a sheer cliff, fall off and not wanting to die, there was also poison oak on the other side. It certainly didn't discourage other people from climbing over. And the reality is, your shot's not going to be that different. So in a case like this, the fence is there for a reason. I'm a big believer in that. And it may even be damaging to the surrounding land, or if there are natural creatures that are nesting there. It's just, obey the signs, obey the fences. They're there for a reason. And don't ruin it for all future photographers because one too many photographers broke the rules, and then it ruins it for everyone. So the tip of the week is natural obstacles, they happen. Try to take them in stride and take them as a challenge to your photographic skills. How can you use them as part of your composition, or how can you come up with creative ways to eliminate them? Some of that might just be like raising your tripod really high and shooting over the top of something and angling downward. Some of that might be the composition choices using framing. And some of that might be composing in such a way that I've got some tree branches that are reaching into the frame here, but they're in a relatively uniform area of sky or something, for example. And I know that I can deal with that in post-processing. So, there could even be a post-processing angle to it when you're looking at the scene itself. Think about, I can't remove, that signpost or that piece of trash that's too far away to reach, but I know I can take care of that digitally. And that's going to wrap it up for today's In the Field episode. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you did, comments, +1s, likes, shares, always appreciated. If you got questions, send them on in to me. I'm all ears. Love getting questions. And until the next time, my name's Scott Davenport. Happy shooting.